Imagine a life where your days are filled with sunshine, friendly faces and beautiful landscape. I mean, Portugal sounds like a dream, doesn't it? But is it really all sunsets and sangria? Or are there hidden challenges that no one talks about? In the next few minutes, we'll dive deep into the pros and cons of living in Portugal, so you'll figure out whether it's right for you or not. With Portugal becoming a top destination for expats and new tax changes rolling out pretty soon, it's a perfect time to actually weigh up your options. As someone who's helped countless people relocate here, I'll give you an honest insider's look at what's really going on.
An amazing place to walk.
We get here. So the pros and cons of living in Portugal. Wow, well there's kind of a lot actually, and I've made some notes about this. I'll refer to them occasionally, but one of the massive pros of living in the Algarve itself is weather. And if you look at the Algarve and you divide it into the west and the east, and you draw a line down the middle, more or less around about Albufeira, which is not quite the middle, but just to the western side is slightly cooler, and to the east is warmer, okay, because you're away from all the big Atlantic storms and things like that, and the cold air coming through the Atlantic. So that, yeah, and also obviously the closer you are to the ocean, like right on the coast, you'll have the moderating influence of the ocean, so you won't get such a high variance. Whereas if you go a little bit higher up, like to where I live in Salaries del Portel, it's about 30-40 kilometers from the ocean, we'll get a higher variance in temperature. So it'll be a little bit hotter and a little bit colder in, up here. So also there's two prevailing weather patterns, main prevailing weather patterns. We get a nortada coming all the way down from the west coast, and that eventually turns, it's amazing, you'll see that it blows offshore during the mornings in the summer, and then generally at about 11 or 12 o'clock midday, it'll switch to be a westerly, so it just curves around a little bit and you get this westerly sweeping all the way across the Algarve. And then occasionally you'll get, the pressure systems switch around and you'll get a lot of air coming out of Gibraltar, and it'll be like, it's because Gibraltar's kind of like a funnel and it just, the wind shunts through there. Tarifa, right next to Gibraltar, is one of the best places in the world to go kite surfing and windsurfing because there's such good wind. But that wind will make its way up to the Algarve eventually, and we call it the swest, which means southeast, so the southeast wind. And with it comes this choppy swell, like a short period swell. So what it does then in the middle of summer, it'll just chop up the ocean, and the Portuguese say it's like a risaca, which is a hangover. And the ocean's all up and down and crazy, and when you're trying to get into the caves, it's really choppy, and so not good to go for some boat tours when you're doing that. So that's the rough weather, and we'll throw in some average temperatures down below as we're going along here. But temperatures during the winter generally are, anywhere between 12 and 20 degrees on the highs down here in the Algarve, and in the summer you'll get probably anywhere between 27 and up to 40, 41, 42 occasionally, very occasionally during the middle of summer. So in Portugal, public transportation is really affordable. If you want to take the bus up from Faro to Lisbon, sometimes you can get it for like 7, 8, 9, 10 bucks. That's 10 euros. It's crazy cheap. Whereas if you take the train is more or less about 30 euros per person if you're going first class on the Alfa Pendular, which is the high speed train, or the more luxurious one. Because trains have three different differentiations. There's the Alfa Pendular, which is the top one, and the fastest one, and the more luxurious one. The middle one is the Intercidades, and then they have regional trains as well, which just stop all over the place, and they're generally very, very slow. So like for example in the Algarve, we have a regional train which goes all the way across the Algarve, and I've done a couple of videos on that as well. So there's buses, there's trains, and if you want to take taxis and stuff, Ubering around the Algarve is relatively cheap, it really is. It's much cheaper than the rest of Europe, and taxis as well, but I hate taxis. I'm sorry, I just hate taxis because you don't know where you're going. I've been ripped off a few times with taxis, and Uber is just much more efficient. And also Uber equivalents, like Bolts and whatever. But that doesn't mean that sometimes the only thing you can do is get a taxi, so try your best. Renting a car is relatively inexpensive, but it can get pricey during the season. So just off season, it's much better because then there'll be there'll be cheaper cars, but you've got to watch out that there will be enough cars as well. So check out a website called discovercars.com. There's a link in the description below where you can sort out exactly what kind of cars you want. And it's great. And we'll get a little bit of a kickback at no extra cost to you. So thanks for that. Appreciate it. Really would be happy. Let us know if you hired a car through us and discovercars.com. But it's great because it's a platform. It actually just lists all the car companies, so you get the best of the best in one easy to use platform. But driving from Lisbon to Faro as opposed to the train only really makes sense if you've got like 3 or 4 people in the car, because from a cost perspective, because it's about $100 there and back, obviously depending on how much fuel you're going to use in your car. But the tolls now on class 1 tolls, which is not a big SUV, a normal car, is 20 euros one way on the highway and 20 euros back. It's about 22 sometimes. It's just depending on where you get on and get off. It's anywhere between 20 and 25 euros. So that adds up, like I say, that's 40, $50, and then you got a tank there and back. So it's another $50, $50, $60. So it can round up to about 100 per trip. So that can get quite pricey. Now, food in Portugal. So many people go crazy about the Portuguese food. I personally wasn't a massive fan in the beginning because I just went to these cheap churrasqueiras. A churrasqueira is basically a grill room. So you just go there and they put some pork on the grill and give it to you with some chips and some rice. And then you have bread as well. We'll talk about bread in a minute. And then I was like, well, where are the vegetables, man? Where are those beautiful tomatoes I've seen on YouTube? And so you have to order that separately, and just do yourself a favor, get a tomato salad. It is actually awesome. It's like just simple stuff. It's tomatoes, beautiful tomatoes with salt and oregano and a bit of olive oil and vinegar. And then it's fantastic, really tasty. But Portuguese food, when you get into a little bit more intricate stuff like cozida portuguesa, which is a Portuguese stew, or bifa portuguesa, which is a Portuguese steak done in some sauce and like with round potatoes, redondos all around the side. That's really, really nice as well. Very interesting. And sometimes served with ham. And what else? You get like assurda, and you get all these specialities that start coming out, and sopa de pedras. But this is not a food video. I'm just saying that there are some interesting things about Portuguese food. Pork is a staple. Okay. There's not that many vegetables around, so you need to ask for them and check for them. Obviously, I'm talking about the basic Portuguese restaurants. When you get to Faro, or when you get to the Algarve, Lisbon or Porto, you can have any kind of restaurant you want. Like, haute cuisine, French restaurants, Chinese restaurants, whatever. So there's a large variety in those areas. But when you get out into the country, you're generally going to be looking at pork. And obviously, on the coast, you'll be looking at a lot of fish, which is fantastic. So the one thing I was going to say about bread is that bread gets brought to your table, and you assume that it's free because they're bringing it to you if you don't know, but it's actually charged as couvert. And you'll see that in the more expensive restaurants, it can get expensive. Sometimes they'll even bring you like presunto, which is like sliced smoked ham. And that can get really expensive, like almost 10 euros for a plate. So make sure that you want what they're bringing, and you can say, no, thank you. I'm not into couvert today, so take it back. So you'll learn this pretty quickly when you arrive in Portugal, if you've been here on holiday. So food, and also another thing about food is whenever you're having a conversation with Portuguese people, expect there to be at least, in any given dinner party, at least a 45-minute conversation just about food. It happens all the time. It's like clockwork. Okay, shopping in Portugal is a good one because there's like basically 3 ways to shop. There are variations, 4 ways to shop actually. So you can go shop in the high street, which is like a lot of towns have a shopping street. Like for example, in Lolé, they have a shopping street and they've got all those, not umbrellas, but sails over the top, sometimes multicolored sails, and it shades you from the sun, and it's really pretty. In Faro, they've got one as well, down next to the marina, and it goes all the way back up, and there's some really nice coffee shops and stuff, and they sometimes have these shopping festivals where they're open late at night, etc., etc. So that's the one way to shop. Second way to shop is at the market. You can always go and shop at markets, get fresh produce there. The prices are more or less the same as they are in the supermarket, but you're supporting a mom and pop thing, and it's a much better way of consuming food, or consuming food items. Or groceries. So then there's the third way is the shopping malls and the big grocery stores like Continent, Lidl, Aldi, Pingo Doce, Intermarché, and many others. And they are they're popping up like mushrooms all over the place. There's just been a new Aldi done in Lollet, finished in Lollet, and they're now building one in Salbrage as well. So we've got so many grocery stores and not enough people, it feels like. But I think maybe they're anticipating growth in the future. So then you can get shopping malls as well, which generally you'll have one of those big grocery stores inside there. And then you've got millions of other shops in there as well. Everybody knows what a shopping mall is. We've got lots of them. They only started popping up in Portugal or in the Algarve in the year 2000. So they haven't been around long, but they are certainly making up for time. It's crazy. And then obviously shopping online is something that a lot of people do. You can shop online. The best thing, if you want to do like Amazon, we don't have Amazon.pt, so we don't have a Portuguese Amazon. But the fastest and cheapest way to get stuff from Amazon is to go to the Spanish Amazon, Amazon.es. Unfortunately, they've only got it in Portuguese and in Spanish, but you can translate on your browser, so that shouldn't be a difficult thing to deal with. But obviously, customer support's in those languages as well. But if you wanted to get Amazon.de, I've been told that it's in English as well, from Germany. You can get stuff, you can shop there. And there's obviously lots of things available, but it does take a little bit longer to get here and it might cost a little bit more in shipping. Do not shop outside of the EU. Well, I mean, you can shop outside the EU. It's just that there's going to be a pain because it'll have to come through customs. And this includes the UK as well. I used to order all my books from the UK and now I've stopped doing that completely because they got hung up in customs. You have to pay extra and it's a back and forth and then it's just a real nightmare. Getting stuff from the USA is just nuts. It really is. It seems to be even harder. So if you want to make your life easier, shop within the EU online. Okay. Also, I mean, even better thing is to try and find a Portuguese store online. My daughter needed some things for music and we found this fantastic place called egitana.pt and it was great. And also I get lots of photography equipment from them as well and it just arrives super quick and it's a great experience. So that's shopping for you. Now, the banking in Portugal is fantastic. It really is. It's like one of the best banking systems in the world. It's like I bank with Millennium. It's a really, really big bank. It actually started I'm pretty sure it started 20 years ago, or it grew radically 20 years ago when it amalgamated with a lot of other banks. And they've got an award-winning website. It's in English as well, so you can do all kinds of things on the website. And they've got apps now, obviously, and you can do anything you want on the app. It's fantastic. Apparently, you can even get divorced at a multi-banco here in Portugal. I just heard that the other day. I haven't tried it yet, but hopefully I will never try it. But it's amazing how many things you can do and how many services you can pay through the multi-banco or through the multi-banco is the machine in the corner where you pull your money out of, or the ATM as we call it. But you can also do a multitude of services there. And all those services that you can do there, you can also do on your mobile phone. So we're calling it just paying services in English. Then there's also, you can pay for things with MBWay. So you can actually pay directly to a telephone number. So that if it's activated, that's a very, very common way of people paying and sharing money amongst people and paying with for small businesses and things like that. So that's another way. And then obviously you can do a bank transfer to people. And that's pretty simple. If you've got the app, you just have to type in the NIB or the IBAN, the international bank account number, and the SWIFT number and everything like that. So then you can transfer domestically or internationally very easily. But if you are going to transfer internationally, I'd suggest you use one of our partners, obviously, because then we make a little cut of it. But it's also much more efficient and cheaper for you in the long run. So get in touch with us if you're interested in doing that. So banking's good. Banking's great. I've never had really any problems here. So a really positive point, like a pro for Portugal, is its healthcare, because it's cheap and it's effective and, well, effective maybe not so much, but it's cheap, and it's an interesting thing because the people who actually take care of you, like the nurses and the doctors and stuff, are so caring and so giving, and this is part of the culture of the Portuguese people. That's fantastic. That's a really good thing. The efficiency is not always there. You might have to wait quite a long time in the public system because we've got a public healthcare system and a private healthcare system. And to be honest, you can wait in the private system as much as the healthcare system, the public system. But generally speaking, the private system is much more efficient, and obviously everybody is speaking English. So in the public system, not so much. But yeah, the gist of it is that the healthcare is great. And I remember speaking to an old English gentleman from the United Kingdom, and he returned to the UK, and he always came back to Portugal to get things done, like medical stuff done, because he loved the Portuguese way of doing things. He loved the Portuguese system. So I think it's very normal for us to, when we're coming from a foreign country, arriving here and go, oh, I want to go back to my home country because I know what's going on there. But the health system here is really good. It really is good. And if you need any specialists, generally they're all up in Lisbon, which is not far to get to from the Algarve. But you can get by on your day-to-day stuff down here in the Algarve. And if you do have any real searing questions about medical healthcare, just get in touch with us. We have some medical experts who can answer your burning questions. Okay, so that's a pro for Portugal. Okay, a con for Portugal right now is the taxes. So it used to be I used to say this all the time. Portugal is a place with high taxes, but even higher tax breaks. And we used to have this thing called NHR, the non-habitual residency, where you'd get max tax of 20% for people who do apply. And that was great. Obviously, people were moving to Portugal in droves because of this. It was fantastic. But that's been taken away now. And it's kind of nice in a way because you've got people who are choosing Portugal for Portugal, not just to make less money and to make efficient money. But I think that, and as we've seen in the past, these tax things come and go, and there will probably be a new tax break around the corner. There's already talk of this new thing called IFIC Plus, which may benefit some people and others. But there are always legal ways to pay less tax. So if you have a good financial advisor, speak to them. In coordination with a tax advisor from your home country. So as I said, we have tax advisors, financial advisors, so get in touch if you want. So that's a con right now, but it could change very soon. Okay, now the culture of Portugal is, and it's hard to say this, but the culture of Portugal has been very, very difficult for me to understand, because initially when I arrived, it just seemed very much like South Africa. The sun was shining, the people were friendly and nice, and there was food and everything was great. But the minute you dig deeper into it, you realize that there's a massive cultural difference between Portugal and many other places in the world. And there are three massive factors that influence the Portuguese culture. One was the Age of Discoveries, two was the Catholic Church, and three was the dictatorship, which ended in 1974, which is 50 years ago. And it just shows the Portuguese resistance to change is that they are changing, but they're still hanging on. There's a lot of, especially amongst the older people, like lack of initiative. And it's a word which is called parochialism. They'll tell you what you want to know if you ask the question, but they won't use initiative and tell you anything else. So there won't be any like volunteering extra information kind of stuff, or like, hey, we don't have your pair of jeans, full stop. And then I'm like, well, do you know anywhere else we can get those jeans? Oh yes, yeah, you can get that at our other shop. And then full stop. And then it's, you know what I mean? It's like, it's not just jeans. It's just a silly example. But like, for example, I was looking for a shop when we were paddling around in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of central Portugal. And I was asking this lady for a shop, and she said, like a loja. And she's like, no, there are no shops in this village. And I was like, well, all we want to do is buy, after talking to her for 5 minutes, all we want to do is buy some bread and cheese. We'll come to our merceria, which is like a shop, right? And the merceria was right around the corner. And that to me was a shop. So you've got to be pretty spot on. You make sure what you ask is what you're going to get and nothing more. Okay, but yeah, Portuguese culture, there's so many aspects to it, and it's fascinating, and it really is. But the one thing that happens in the Algarve is that this leads on to another point, is that there's a very, very slow pace of life and slow pace of business as well. And stuff takes a long time to get done. And if you try and push it on, generally, you will get pushed back, and it'll just take even longer. So that's a con about life here, but it's also a positive in a way, because I remember arriving in Portugal and looking at people's values, and they'd much rather spend time with each other eating food and having sardines and making a really, really big meal with the family than rushing around getting stuff done. So there's this switch in life. It's a focus of life. And I think that's a lot of things that expats want to do when they arrive here. They want to slow down, but then they get frustrated because it's slow down. So it's a bit tricky, isn't it? But, I consider slow pace of life is both a pro and a con. It's what we want, but it also can get frustrating. And along with that slow pace of life, that permeates into the bureaucracy of the government, which also has other elements to it, like corruption and things like that. And there's nepotism and all kinds of interesting stuff going on here in Portugal and most places in the world, to be honest. If you want to get stuff done from the government, expect a long wait, expect 1 million forms to be filled in, and sometimes expect a computer to be nowhere in sight. There's just piles of paper. And that's still like this today. So it's changing, obviously. There are some really surprising things that you can do online these days, which I suddenly realized, and I read the newspaper, like, oh wow, you can do that service, like, change your driver's license online, which is fantastic. So watch out for things that are changing. Don't take my word for it that all these things are slow and terrible. But that's another con, is the general bureaucracy and the red tape. They love filling in forms. Okay, another con. We're getting to the bad stuff. There are low salaries in Portugal. And it's a wonder that so many Portuguese actually survive, because cost of living's going up and it's hard. It really is tough. But I wouldn't expect to come here looking for a job. If you want to come and move to Portugal, really try and organize yourself an online job so you can earn outside and spend money inside, and you still pay taxes here, which is great. So you're still contributing to the economy. You're still buying goods here, which is great. You're just bringing wealth into the country, which is good. Competitive jobs, especially in the Algarve. I often say that there's 3 main industries in the Algarve. There's construction, there's real estate, and there's tourism. Not much else. So it's changing slowly, and there are little pockets of IT in Faro itself, which is great. Some really inspiring guys trying to get stuff done, and they're getting grants, and they're doing great work. So there are little pockets of ingenuity and initiative all over the place. So look out for those. It's exciting. Likewise, with low salaries, obviously jobs are pretty scarce as well. And it kind of goes along with low salaries, is that the jobs aren't really attractive because they have low salaries. So that's a misnomer, really. But I wouldn't come here looking for a job. I would try and make your own job. Come here and open your own business, or come here with a digital job or something, or working remotely from somewhere else, or open up your own business online or something like that, which I've been striving to do for 20 years. Finally, we've done it. It's great. Okay, there's just one last thing, which is a real pain, and accommodation obviously is very important. Everybody needs shelter. And accommodation in the Algarve in particular, and all throughout Portugal, is not very good. And they have thin walls, which creates damp, and there's not proper damp proofing, things like that. There's also thin walls which create noise if you're living in an apartment block, so paper thin walls. And that happens throughout the southern Europe. It's not something which is peculiar to Portugal. But obviously new builds these days are getting much better production quality or construction quality, and you can do things to damp proof stuff and to make the walls more soundproof by putting on panels on the outside and the inside, and there's all kinds of technology that you can do, but just expect to pay a little bit more if you want to redo your house, if you're buying a house or something. If you're renting a house, well, it doesn't make that much sense to redo the walls, but you just got to be aware of that, they're not the best quality all over. So I hope this helps, actually. It's like a list of pros and a list of cons, and some of these pros and cons are like kind of variables, so they're not, one's a pro and that could be viewed as a con, and vice versa. But I do hope that it helped giving you a little insight into Portuguese life, what it's like living here. I've been living here for 23 years, so I've experienced this stuff, and I still love it. So thanks so much for watching, and have a look at this list and see whether these things are pros and cons for you, because it's different for everybody. And one thing that's been bugging me the whole time I've been editing this video is this sign, which was very kindly given to me by one of you guys, wasn't hung up. It's now hung up. So thanks a lot. Have a fantastic week. See you next time. AlgarveAddicts.com. We'll see you next week, but if you need any help relocating to the Algarve, click through to our website, algarveaddicts.com. We offer tours, immigration assistance, long-term rentals, and we can buy your house.